At Christmas dinner, my family gifted everyone except me. Then I revealed my empire. That sentence doesn't sting as much now as it did the moment it happened. Because when you've spent most of your life being the afterthought in your own family, you develop a certain tolerance for quiet humiliation. But this time, something shifted. This time, I didn't lower my eyes and pretend not to notice. I let the silence speak, and then I broke it. My name is Eva Longoria. I'm 38, co-founder of an education tech startup based in Denver, Colorado, and until last December. I hadn't been home to Phoenix for 6 years. My company, Elavana, started in a shared basement apartment with 3 laptops and a stubborn belief that under-resourced kids deserved access to real technology, not just outdated school Chromebooks and broken promises. By the end of our 3rd year, we were piloting learning programs across 8 states, building adaptive AI modules that reached kids in foster care, on reservations, and in rural districts forgotten by both politicians and publishers. But none of that mattered in my family. To them, I was still Eva with the online tutoring thing. Growing up, I learned early not to take up too much space. My older sister Clara was the family's star valedictorian turned public relations executive, always impeccably dressed and endlessly admired by my mother. My younger brother Eric was the golden boy engineer, athlete, hometown success story with a booming construction firm and a growing family. Me, I was the quiet one in the middle, the one who stayed in her room during family cookouts, fiddling with websites, building code no one wanted to hear about. Our father passed away when I was 15, and after that, the hierarchy was locked in like cement. Mom leaned on Clara for grace, Eric for legacy, and kept me around mostly for chores. When I left for college in Colorado on a partial scholarship, no one came to drop me off. Clara was busy with work, Eric had a tournament, and Mom said she didn't want to make it a big deal. I remember standing in front of the dorm with one suitcase, watching other students hug their parents, and thinking, maybe I'll make something of myself so they have to notice. But years passed, and the more I achieved, the less I told them, not out of spite, but because silence had become the language we all spoke fluently. The invitation home came from my grandmother, Rosa, who never stopped calling me her little architect. I wasn't, of course. But she always said I was building things when she turned 80. She wanted just one gift for all 3 of her grandchildren to be under one roof for Christmas, like the old days. So I bought a plane ticket, closed my laptop, and flew back to Phoenix. I didn't bring anything flashy, just a navy cashmere coat, a quiet confidence, and an envelope in my suitcase that could alter the room if opened. The house hadn't changed. Same white stucco, same scent of overcooked cinnamon candles, same framed photos of Clara's awards and Eric's family vacations. My mother greeted me at the door with the same half smile she always used when unsure how to act. "You look well," she said, her eyes pausing on my shoes, coat, then face, calculating. Clara hugged me in that way people do when they don't want to smudge their makeup. Eric offered a distracted hey before heading back to whatever business call he was managing from the garage. I stayed in the guest room now, which used to be the laundry storage. My old bedroom had been converted into Clara's remote office during the pandemic. No one apologized. I didn't ask for explanations. The first night, I ate quietly while they compared Eric's new contracts and Clara's upcoming PR campaign for a fashion brand in New York. I mentioned Elavana once, saying we'd just closed a state education grant, Mom responded with, "Oh, you're still doing that teaching app thing." I nodded, tucked the sentence away, and decided not to offer more. What I didn't say was that Elavana had just been featured in a national education journal. What I didn't mention was that our last investor round had pushed our valuation to over $40 million, or that my company was on track to expand into 7 international markets next year. That would have sounded like bragging. And in this house, I'd been trained not to reach for center stage. The next evening, as we sat wrapping presents in the living room, I watched Clara receive a Cartier pen set from Mom, Eric get a custom golf club carrier, and each of their kids open massive boxes of toys. My gift was a generic coffee mug that said "Work hard." Stay humble in glittery font. No tag, no note, no explanation. I just smiled, thanked them, and turned the mug in my hands like it might reveal some deeper meaning. That night, I lay awake in bed with the envelope still zipped in my suitcase. Maybe this wasn't the right time. Maybe they wouldn't care. Or maybe, just maybe, they needed to see it, not to validate me, but so I could finally walk away knowing they'd looked, even once, at the woman I had become. By the third day, it was obvious nothing had really changed. Clara spoke about her award ceremony in L.A. with the ease of someone used to being listened to. Eric dominated every meal with stories of his construction team overcoming challenges, each anecdote landing like a carefully placed trophy on the table. Mom filled in the gaps with her usual narrations of neighborhood gossip, Clara's kids' achievements, or reminders to thaw something for dinner. I tried a few times to join in, casually mentioning Elavana's program in Oklahoma, or the mentorship fund we'd launched for girls in tech. Each time, the conversation gently veered off course, like my words had no grip on the walls of that house. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was just tired of watching a movie where I'd never been part of the cast. Grandma Rosa noticed. Of course, she always did, that evening, while the others were decorating cookies in the kitchen. She came and sat beside me in the quiet of the porch. The desert night had a dry stillness that made her voice sound clearer. She didn't ask what was wrong. She simply said, "They've never known how to hold what's not familiar." I looked at her and almost laughed. She was wearing one of the knitted scarves I'd sent her last year. Even though she lived in Phoenix, I wear it for the intention. She said when I teased her, "Not the temperature." Later that night, I helped her with her phone. Claire had bought her a new one, but hadn't set it up. I adjusted her settings, made her favorite contacts big and bright on the home screen, added voice command, and set reminders for her pills. She watched quietly, then said, "You've built something, haven't you?" I didn't answer right away. She looked at me like she already knew. "I built a lot, Grandma, but here, I feel like I never left the starting line." She placed a wrinkled hand on mine. "Then maybe it's time they catch up." The next morning was Christmas Eve. Clara and Eric's families had arrived with a flurry of noise and bright bags. Each kid had a designated stocking. Each adult had personalized wrapping paper with glittering tags. Mine sat untouched in the coat closet where I dropped it on arrival. No one noticed. As the afternoon wore on, Clara's husband toasted to her award nomination. Eric's wife handed out matching flannel pajamas for their side of the family. I excused myself to the backyard, needing air. My mug sat forgotten on the patio table, the one that said "Work hard, stay humble." I stared at it for a long time, then carried it to the trash, dropped it in, and walked back inside. That night, we had our traditional dinner. Everyone shared stories about their year. Clara's speech was polished, like she'd rehearsed it for a gala. Eric's was humble bragging, hidden in blue-collar language. When it was my turn, Mom looked down at her plate. I smiled and said, "It's been a meaningful year. I'll share more tomorrow." She nodded, relieved that I didn't steal the spotlight. The final blow came Christmas morning. The living room was glowing. Fireplace on, camera set for photos. One by one, names were called and gifts handed out. The kids shrieked. Clara opened a designer handbag. Eric received a golf weekend package. Even Clara's dog got a custom bed. I waited, holding my cocoa, silent. No one called my name. After the final gift was handed out, the room moved on like I was a shadow in the corner. My heart didn't break. It just went quiet. A silence that hummed louder than the carols playing from the speakers. My niece, bless her innocent heart, finally asked, "What did Aunt Eva get?" The room stiffened. My mother, flustered, said, "Oh, we weren't sure she was coming. But we'll get her something next week," Clara chimed in. "I think I have an extra candle in the car." I declined with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I don't know what stung more, the forgetting or the way they all moved on without shame. I left the room quietly and went upstairs. I stood at the foot of the guest bed, unzipped my suitcase, and took out the envelope I'd been carrying. It held the feature article from EdTech Futures, the one with my face on the cover and the headline, "The Woman Rebuilding American Classrooms with AI." It held our 8-figure grant letter from the National Education Trust, and it held a donation certificate under the Longoria name for $500,000 to Arizona Youth STEM Labs. I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it back, zipped the case, and sat down. I wasn't going to leave. Not yet. Tomorrow. I'd let them see it, not for revenge, not for recognition, just to end the illusion that I was small. I didn't cry that night. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain wasn't new. It was just better defined now, sharper in its familiarity. Being forgotten didn't feel like a shock anymore. It felt like a pattern, finally reaching its final, unmistakable shape. I lay awake in that stiff guest bed, listening to the muffled laughter downstairs, and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit for years. I had spent a lifetime shrinking myself to protect their comfort, dimming my light so it wouldn't reflect their own insecurities. And in doing so, I'd let them write a version of me so small. Even I started to believe it. Morning came slow. I helped Grandma Rosa prepare the breakfast casserole. Neither of us speaking much. She handed me the cinnamon without asking, like she knew I needed the silence to keep from unraveling. When we finally sat down to eat, the house was buzzing again with surface joy. No one mentioned the gift mishap. It had already been boxed away like a forgotten decoration. I listened quietly as Clara passed around engagement news from her friend group, and Eric updated everyone on a mall renovation project. My mother gave an impromptu toast, nothing grand, just her version of grateful for family and warm homes. I smiled and nodded in the right places, but under the table. The envelope sat in my lap, steady as a stone. After breakfast, I slipped away to the sunroom, the only corner of the house where sunlight didn't feel like surveillance. I needed time to think, not about what to say, but how to say it in a way that wasn't angry, wasn't defensive, just real. Alex called while I sat by the window. His voice always brought me back to center. "How's the battlefield?" he asked, only half joking. "Predictable," I replied. "They forgot me. Again." He exhaled slowly. "Ava, we both know it's not about a present. It's about being erased. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, I'm not here to make them like me. I just want to stop pretending I don't exist. He paused, then said something I didn't expect. Then stop waiting for a moment, make one. I stared at the magazine again. My face on the cover looked composed, maybe even proud, but I remembered the day that photo was taken. I had just pulled a 16-hour shift, helping a district in Mississippi stabilize their virtual classrooms after a ransomware attack. I hadn't slept, hadn't showered, but when they told me the kids were back online and safe, it felt like the biggest win of my life. That was the version of me no one in that house knew, and maybe that was my fault. Or maybe they never asked because they never believed it could be true. Lunch came with the usual rhythm table set with precision, dishes perfectly timed, conversation perfectly superficial. As we finished the main course, my father's old tradition resurfaced. Even though he wasn't here anymore, Mom had picked up the habit of raising a glass to acknowledge each child's success. To Clara, she said, for continuing to rise in her firm. A true role model. We all clinked. To Eric, for building the city stronger. One project at a time. More glasses raised. Then silence. No one looked at me, not even Grandma, who seemed to be holding her breath. I cleared my throat. Softly, I have something to share. The words floated in the air longer than I expected. Then Clara looked up, surprised. Eric leaned back. Mom blinked, like she had misheard me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. I didn't hand it to anyone. I simply opened it, pulled out the magazine, and placed it in the center of the table. My photo stared back at them, bold against the glossy print. Underneath it, the headline read, Tech Visionary Eva Longoria Reshaping Education for Underserved Youth. No one spoke. I unfolded the second document, the grant letter, and laid it beside the magazine. The 8-figure number at the bottom glinted under the afternoon light. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at them and said, this is the work I've been doing the past 6 years. The silence that followed was not the kind I was used to. It wasn't indifferent. It was stunned. Clara's hand hovered near her wine glass, uncertain. Eric leaned forward, reading the documents again like he didn't trust his own eyes. Mom finally broke the silence. Why didn't you tell us, she asked. Her voice fragile, confused. Because you never asked, I said, because whenever I tried, the conversation shifted, because for years, I was told I was just playing with websites, that it wasn't real. Eric shook his head slowly. This is huge. I nodded once. Yes, it is. And then I reached into the envelope again. From the envelope, I pulled out a small stack of letters, each with a name written in handwriting only I knew. I placed them gently on the table, one by one, for Clara, for Eric, for Mom, and finally, one tucked aside for Grandma Rosa. I didn't rush. I let the silence sit there as each person slowly reached for their envelope. These are gifts, I said calmly, not bought in a rush or grabbed from a store shelf, but created, thought through, built, the way I build everything with intention. No one moved for a moment. Then Clara opened hers first. Inside was a customized digital storytelling kit we'd developed at Elavana for underprivileged students, repackaged now as a branded campaign platform, tailored for nonprofits and community outreach leaders. It's in your name, I added. You'll be the lead advisor on its launch if you want. It already has interest from 2 public school networks in LA. Eric opened his next. Inside was a beta access code and dashboard login to our new infrastructure workforce training app, something we designed for high school seniors looking to enter technical trades. This module's already piloting in Colorado and New Mexico. I said, but I thought Arizona's building sector could use it too. You'll be listed as an honorary board member if you want to help scale it here. He stared at the screen, blinking slowly. He wasn't used to being speechless. Mom's letter was thinner. It contained a printed page of her old photographs, now digitally restored and organized into cloud albums, complete with family timelines and audio annotations. You told me once that your biggest fear was that our stories would disappear. I said, so I saved them. I even found the old tape of your wedding. It's synced to a private digital archive. You just have to log in. Her hand covered her mouth, but no words came. Then, I turned to Grandma Rosa. Her letter was handwritten. Inside, a tablet specially designed for seniors, preloaded with her favorite books, her church's live stream, her health tracking app, and video call presets connected only to me. Your flight confirmation's in there too. I said softly, you're coming to Denver in spring. We already made plans. Remember, she smiled through tears she didn't wipe away. You built all this, she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. From scratch. No one said thank you right away. They were too stunned, too caught in that delicate place between admiration and embarrassment, pride and shame. I let them sit with it. I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed to finish saying what I had spent years carrying inside me. I didn't come here for validation. I said, I came because I was tired of pretending I hadn't grown. I spent years shrinking myself just to keep this house comfortable. I stopped mentioning wins so no one felt threatened. I stopped inviting you in because every time I tried, the door stayed shut. Clara finally looked up. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought you were just doing tech stuff, nothing big. I nodded. That's what you all assumed, because it was easier than being curious. But this, what I do, helps children, changes outcomes. And you never asked. Eric's jaw was tight, eyes still on the dashboard screen. You're worth way more than I thought, he said. And for once, it didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a realization that cost him something. Mom reached for her coffee, hand shaking slightly. I guess we underestimated what you were really building. I didn't respond. Some sentences don't need replies. They just need to hang there and echo a little. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen, fully, clearly, and maybe for the first time in that house. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the woman who had written her own narrative outside of the family script. As the room settled into quiet again, I stood slowly and began collecting the empty plates. Clara moved to help. So did Eric, for a few seconds. We worked side by side in a way that didn't feel forced. Like maybe, just maybe, we could start from this place. Not pretending the past didn't happen, but finally acknowledging that it had and choosing something better anyway. That afternoon passed like a thaw after a long frost. No one apologized, not directly, but something had shifted in the temperature of the room. The tension that had followed me like a shadow since the moment I arrived seemed to lift just slightly. It didn't turn into warmth, not yet, but it wasn't ice anymore. Clara lingered near the kitchen longer than usual, asking quiet questions about how our team handled software development across state lines. Eric offered to help me carry the dessert tray, a small gesture that felt heavier than it looked. Even my mother, who had always measured success by what could be held in a hand or shown off at brunch, sat quietly at the dining table for a full hour. scrolling through the digital photo archive I'd made for her. I watched her pause at an old picture of Dad holding me on his shoulders. She didn't say anything, but for the first time, I saw something soft in her face. Maybe memory, maybe regret, or maybe just the recognition of a moment she never thought would return to her in color again. I wasn't expecting transformation. I knew better than that. Years of being overlooked didn't unravel with one slideshow or magazine article, but I also wasn't looking for grand gestures. I just wanted honesty, the ability to sit at the same table and not feel like I was a foreign language no one wanted to translate. That evening, while the rest of the family watched an old holiday movie in the living room, I sat on the porch with Grandma Rosa, wrapped in the same scarf I had sent her the year before. She held her new tablet carefully, like it might shatter from tenderness alone. "You've always been the quiet one," she said. "But quiet doesn't mean small. It just means you've been listening longer than the rest." I looked at her and smiled. "You're the only one who ever saw me without needing proof." She reached over and took my hand. "You didn't come here to show off. Eva, you came to come home, even if it wasn't for them." I nodded. She was right. I hadn't wanted them to kneel. I just wanted them to look, really look, and now that they had, I felt something unhooking in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but freedom. The next morning, I found Clara in the kitchen alone. She was stirring coffee slowly, staring into the cup like it might offer answers. "I read the whole article last night," she said, not looking up, twice. I waited. She exhaled through her nose and finally met my eyes. "I think I convinced myself you were doing fine, but not impressive. I needed to believe I was the one leading, that you were just figuring it out." Her voice didn't break, but it did soften. That wasn't fair. I didn't rush to forgive her. I just nodded. "We all make stories to protect ourselves." I said, "But eventually they don't fit anymore." She blinked fast, like maybe that hit something deeper than she expected. Then she surprised me. "I'd like to know more. Not about Elevana, about you, like what you do for fun, who you are outside work." I felt a tightness in my throat I hadn't planned for. "I'd like that too," I said. Eric's response was quieter, less verbal, later that day. He handed me a small box. Inside was a notepad from his construction company, with a note scribbled across the front. "If you ever want to build something physical, I know people." It wasn't eloquent, but it was something. From him. That meant the world. But the moment that stayed with me most came when I was packing to leave. My mother knocked gently on the guest room door. An unfamiliar act in itself. She held out a gift bag, clearly purchased the day before, and handed it to me without meeting my eyes. Inside was a silk scarf. Beautiful, expensive, generic. I thanked her, because politeness still lived in my bones. Then I looked at her and said, "Next year, I don't need a gift. I'd just like a seat at the table where someone asks how I'm doing." She nodded slowly. "I don't know how to talk to you sometimes." She admitted, "You've become something I don't understand." I held her gaze, steady and calm, then asked, "That's all I've ever wanted." She didn't hug me, but as I walked down the stairs with my suitcase, I noticed something folded on the hall table. A printed screenshot of the EdTech article, placed beside a photo of Dad from years ago. It was subtle, almost hidden, but it was there. And sometimes the smallest acknowledgments speak the loudest. The morning I left, the house was still quiet, dipped in the soft blue light of winter. I zipped my suitcase without sound, careful not to wake anyone. The guest room looked the same, but it felt lighter, like something had been lifted that I hadn't realized I was carrying. I glanced around one last time, not with sadness, but with clarity. The mismatched hangers, the folded cot near the wall, the old bookshelf stacked with cleaning supplies instead of childhood books, it all confirmed something I now fully accepted. This wasn't my place to return to. It was a stop. One final visit to a version of the past I no longer needed. Downstairs. Grandma Rosa was waiting in the kitchen, already dressed, her coat buttoned up neatly, and her tablet tucked under one arm. She gave me a look that said everything without speaking. We had our tea in silence, and then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a handwritten note from my grandfather, dated years ago, when I was still a teenager. Eva has something the others don't, it read. She sees things differently. She asks why when others settle for how. I hadn't known he ever wrote that. She pressed it into my hand like a baton. He believed in you before any of us knew how. We didn't hug for long. She hated drawn-out goodbyes. As I stepped outside, Clara was already by the driveway, coffee in hand, hair tied back casually. She looked like someone who had thought through a dozen things to say and deleted them all before I arrived. "Let me know when you launch that mentorship thing officially," she said. "Maybe I can help with press outreach." I nodded. "I'll loop you in next month. We're beta testing with a girls' charter school in Albuquerque." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. That, for her, was progress. Eric came out just as I opened the car door. He had a brown bag in his hand and held it out awkwardly. "Breakfast burrito for the drive. No onions. I remember you hated those." I took it, surprised. "Thanks." He scratched the back of his neck, then said quietly, "You did good, Eva. Real good. I'm proud of you." He didn't wait for my response, just turned back toward the house like saying it had taken more effort than he wanted to admit. But it was enough. My mother didn't come out. I didn't expect her to. But as I placed my suitcase in the trunk, I saw the blind shift in the upstairs window, a flicker of movement. Maybe that was her way of saying goodbye. Maybe it was just habit. Either way, I didn't take it personally. Some people are too tangled in their own stories to rewrite them fully. That doesn't mean I have to stand still waiting. The drive back to the airport felt different from all the ones before. It wasn't an escape. It wasn't an exile. It was a return to the life I'd built, not one I was still trying to prove I deserved. As the Phoenix skyline faded into the distance, I played the audio message Grandma Rosa had recorded on her new tablet. Her voice crackled through, warm and unhurried. "You're not too much, Eva. They were just too quiet for your volume. Don't lower it again. Let the right ones find your station." Back in Denver, Alex picked me up at arrivals, grinning like nothing had changed. "So," he asked, sliding my suitcase into the back seat, "Operation Closure or Operation Comeback?" I buckled in before answering. "Neither." I said, "It was Operation Mirror. I needed to see who I was when I stood in front of people who never believed it. And now I do." In the weeks that followed, life resumed its rhythm: strategy meetings, product development cycles, late-night testing sessions, investor briefings. But something was different, lighter, quieter, but not in the way silence used to sting. More like space had opened up inside me. Room I no longer had to use for defending, proving, explaining, just living. Clara sent over a contact from her firm to help with media exposure for Elevana's scholarship program. Eric forwarded a proposal from his local union to integrate our app into their apprentice pipeline. My mother didn't call, but she did email once a blurry photo of my old spelling bee medal she found while cleaning, followed by, "You always did aim higher than the rest of us." I didn't reply right away, but when I did, I kept it simple. "Thanks, Mom. I still am." The first Monday back in Denver, I unlocked the office door at 6:45 a.m. The air was still, coffee pot cold, floors quiet. I liked arriving early, not because I had something to prove, but because silence now meant possibility, not absence. I took a breath and let it settle in my chest. That grounded kind of calm you only find when you stop needing applause to know you're walking the right path. The team arrived gradually, one by one, cheerful and half drowsy. Alex dropped his bag on the chair beside mine and passed me my favorite oat milk latte without needing to ask. "So," he said, leaning against the table, "how's it feel to walk back in holding zero weight?" I didn't answer right away. I just smiled, shook my head gently, and said strange and overdue. We spent the morning reviewing impact data from our winter pilot programs. One district in West Texas had reported a 40% improvement in digital literacy scores. A rural program in Utah emailed photos of sixth graders using Elevana's tools to design their first app ideas. I forwarded the photos to Clara that afternoon. She replied 10 minutes later, "This is incredible. I had no idea tech could look like this." I didn't say what I was thinking, which was that she'd never asked before. I just told her. Neither did most of them, until they saw it through the kids. In the weeks that followed, my life returned to its rhythm, but with an added texture, like something invisible had been sanded smooth. For the first time in years, I could speak about my work without shrinking it. When I told stories about our teams, our users, our goals, I didn't downplay the scope or filter the ambition. I let the words land. I let my impact speak at its natural volume. I stopped making myself smaller just to fit inside someone else's definition of modesty. Eric reached out again a few weeks later. He asked if I'd be open to leading a short workshop for the teens working summer hours at his construction firm. I agreed instantly, not because I needed to impress him, but because helping kids who are underestimated hit a nerve I didn't want to silence. I sent him a curriculum draft. He called back a few hours later. "This is actually brilliant," he said. "Makes me wish someone had shown me this when I was their age." I laughed. "You had Dad," I said. "You didn't need code. You had blueprint paper and a hammer." He paused for a second. "Yeah, but you had code in silence. That's harder." The conversation didn't get emotional. That wasn't our style. But his tone changed when he hung up, like something had finally clicked in his mind that couldn't be unclicked. My mother's emails continued sporadically, always brief, always slightly stiff. She sent me a photo of an old science fair certificate she found in a box labeled Eva's stuff, followed by, "You always were curious, even if we didn't understand it." It wasn't an apology, but it was more than she had ever said before. One night, she called instead of writing. I answered, surprised. We talked for 12 minutes, mostly about Grandma Rose's doctor appointment and the weather. But just before she hung up, she said something quiet, almost too soft to catch. "I'm trying. Ava, I know it's late, but I'm trying." I let her sit in that sentence a second longer, then replied with the only truth that mattered. "That's all I need." What I learned wasn't that families change overnight. It was that some never will, and that's okay. Closure isn't always cinematic. Sometimes it's just someone finally pronouncing your name right when they've been miscalling it for years. Sometimes it's a sister asking about your weekend, not your resume. Sometimes it's eating a burrito alone in an airport parking lot, feeling proud, not bitter, just peaceful. Not because you got even, but because you grew out of needing to. By March, Grandma Rosa had settled into video calls like she'd been born with the tablet. She called every Sunday at the same time, always opening with, "How are you really, mija?" And I always answered honestly, not to perform, not to prove anything, just to be heard. She became the only person I didn't need to translate myself for. And in a world that had once made me feel invisible at my own family table, that felt like enough. Spring came early that year in Denver. The snow thinned sooner than expected, and with it, something inside me softened too. I was walking into meetings with my shoulders a little looser, answering questions without rushing to downplay what I knew. There was space now, not just in the office or the calendar, but in my chest, a quiet room I could finally sit in without hearing echoes of old doubts. And the first time I noticed it was the day a high school senior named Alondra asked to speak to me after a community event. She had thick curls pulled into a messy bun, a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and a grip on her backpack like it held everything she couldn't say out loud. I had just wrapped up a panel about women in education tech when she approached, standing off to the side, waiting until the last hand was shaken. "Miss Longoria," she said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. She didn't waste time. "Did you always know they were wrong about you? Or did it take a while to believe it yourself?" I stared at her a second too long, caught off guard by how precisely she had spoken to something I hadn't realized still lived in me. I asked her to sit. We talked for 25 minutes. I told her I didn't always know, that some days I still forget. But I keep going anyway, because the people who don't believe in me aren't the ones I build for. When she left, I didn't feel proud. I felt responsible, not in a burdensome way, but in the quiet way you do when you realize someone sees your path as proof that theirs is possible. And from that day on, I started showing up with more transparency, not just the highlights, not just the glossy side of building a startup, but the days I doubted, the weeks I didn't sleep, the stretch of months I thought about quitting altogether, because those were the pieces no one had shown me when I was coming up. And I wasn't going to let the next generation walk through that same silence alone. One evening, a girl named Camila, one of our scholarship recipients, sent a video message. It was filmed on a cracked phone with shaky hands, but her voice was steady. "I used to think coding wasn't for girls like me," she said, "but now I know it's not about being the loudest in the room. It's about building rooms where more of us fit." I watched that video 3 times before saving it to a folder labeled "Why I Started." I never shared it publicly. Some things you keep close, like a letter to yourself from a younger version of who you used to be. Grandma Rosa visited in late April, just as the cherry blossoms along the trail by my apartment began to bloom. I booked her a direct flight, hired a car to pick her up at the terminal, and had her tablet synced with every app she liked before she even landed. When she stepped into my apartment, she paused by the window, looked at the downtown skyline, and said, "You built this, mija, not just the company, the life." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until she said it out loud. We spent slow mornings together, walking to the cafe down the street, talking about everything from family history to the new smart oven she still didn't trust. I showed her around Elevana's headquarters. She met our team, watched a live demo, and even sat in on a video call with a group of sixth graders from South Carolina who shouted her name and waved. "That's Ava's abuela," one girl asked, eyes wide. "She's part of the company too." Grandma Rosa laughed. "I sure am. I'm the reminder department." One night, as we sat on my balcony watching the city wind down, she said something I'd never forget. "You spent so long trying to be seen by the people who should have noticed without needing to be told. But sometimes, Mija, you've got to stop knocking on doors that were never built to open for you. Instead, you build your own and leave it open behind you." Her words stayed with me, not as a warning, but as a quiet truth I could carry forward. I didn't need a standing ovation at Christmas dinner. I didn't need to be the favorite. I just needed to keep showing up as myself, fully, not half present, not waiting for permission, just building what I knew the world needed, even if some of the people closest to me never understood why. By early summer, something in me had settled that no calendar or accomplishment had managed to trigger before. It wasn't joy exactly, and it wasn't pride either. It was steadiness, a kind of quiet knowing that I didn't need to keep checking the rearview mirror to justify the direction I was driving in. I wasn't trying to impress my family anymore. I wasn't even waiting for them to circle back and catch up. I had simply stopped needing them to witness my success in order for it to be real. That's not to say things didn't improve. They did, in their own way and on their own timeline. Clara began sending me articles about educational equity initiatives, sometimes with comments, sometimes just a link and a timestamp. Eric emailed once with a suggestion for how to get Elevana into the vocational training space for veterans. I replied that we were already planning it. He wrote back, "Of course you are." It was the kind of sentence that would have sounded dismissive years ago. But now it just sounded like reluctant admiration, finally catching up to truth. Even my mother surprised me. On Father's Day, she called, not for long, just enough time to ask how I was spending the weekend, and to mention she'd donated to a scholarship fund Elevana supported. Though she mispronounced the name, Elvana. Right, I didn't correct her. I just thanked her. Because I understood now that effort sometimes looks awkward before it becomes fluent. She was trying, even if clumsily, and that had to count for something. But the biggest shift wasn't external. It was how I began rewriting the rules of how I measured closeness. I stopped waiting for people to be everything. I let them be who they were, in the ways they could be present. And I chose where to invest the rest of my energy. I didn't chase one-sided conversations. I didn't reply out of obligation. I didn't confuse proximity with connection. And the result was surprising. The silence that used to feel like abandonment now felt like space I could fill with what actually mattered. One night in June, I met up with a few mentees from our leadership cohort. One of them, a bright, sharp girl named Hannah, asked me how I balanced family with ambition. I told her the truth. I didn't balance it. I just stopped trying to squeeze the two into shapes that didn't fit. Sometimes, I said, the most powerful thing you can do is accept that some people will never clap for you and still build anyway. She blinked slowly, nodded once, and said, "That actually makes me feel better, like I'm not failing just because they don't get it." I told her she wasn't, not even close. Later that week, I received a postcard from Grandma Rosa. It wasn't handwritten. She had used a digital service I'd installed on her tablet, and it printed a message on real paper in perfect block letters. It read, "Mi amor, not everyone needs to understand your light. Just promise me you won't dim it for the ones who refuse to look." I pinned that card above my desk, next to our first wireframe of Elevana's interface, not because I needed motivation, but because reminders are sometimes more honest when they're small. When my birthday came in July, I didn't wait for a call from Phoenix. I booked a quiet weekend for myself up near Boulder, hiked through a ridge I'd never explored, and read 3 chapters of a book that had nothing to do with business or strategy. I turned off notifications. I didn't post a single photo. It wasn't about who saw it. It was about finally being present for my own milestones without needing to perform them. When I came back, there were 4 text messages from my mother. One said happy birthday. One included a blurry photo of me at age 6, sitting in the garage with a toy laptop. The caption simply read, "Guess you always knew." Another was from Clara, who had sent a digital gift card with the note, "For your next coding escape." Eric's message just said, "Don't forget to rest. You're not a machine." For them, this was effort. For me, it was enough. I didn't screenshot any of those texts. I didn't forward them to friends as proof of growth or redemption. I didn't overanalyze their tone. I just read them once, smiled, and moved on with my day. When the next holiday season came around, I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel excitement either, just a quiet readiness, the kind that comes when you've already made peace with the weight of old rooms. That year, instead of flying home for Christmas, I invited Grandma Rosa to spend it with me in Denver. Clara surprised me by asking if she and her partner could join too. "We're trying to start some new traditions," she said, less formal, more honest. I told her she was welcome. No expectations, just bring warmth, not performance. She agreed. We cooked dinner together in my kitchen. Nothing extravagant, just food we actually liked, not what generations said we had to eat. No one wore matching outfits. No one gave a toast for the camera. Instead, Clara stood by the sink after the meal, sleeves rolled up, quietly washing dishes beside me, while Grandma taught her how to make tamarind syrup from scratch. We didn't talk about work or wins. We talked about how long Denver's fall had lasted, about books we never finished, about the weird dreams we'd been having, and for once, it didn't feel like I had to earn my space in the room. I just existed, and it was enough. At one point during the evening, Eric called from Arizona. He had taken his kids camping and called mostly to let Grandma hear their voices. But before hanging up, he said, "Clara told me you're hosting. That's good. She said it feels real there." I smiled. "It does." He was quiet for a second, then said, "Maybe next year. I'll make it out too." I didn't hold my breath, but I didn't doubt him either. Not anymore. After everyone left, I stood alone in the hallway, lights dimmed, candles still flickering in the kitchen. I looked around my apartment. This place I had once moved into with just a mattress and a laptop. Now it held soft furniture, framed memories, plants I hadn't killed, an energy that didn't ask me to apologize for existing. I pulled out the same envelope I had once carried into my mother's dining room, not because I needed to look at it again, but because I wanted to close it for good. That envelope had been my shield, my proof, my "I told you so" wrapped in professionalism, but I didn't need it anymore, because now I understood something I had missed for years. Power doesn't come from being recognized. It comes from refusing to disappear when no one is looking. I tucked it away in a drawer, not to forget, but to honor what it took to get here. Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and began writing a letter not to my family, not to my company, but to the girl I used to be, the one who stayed quiet at the table, who accepted invisibility like it was her birthright. I told her she didn't have to keep proving herself. I told her she had always been enough, that not being seen didn't mean she wasn't worth seeing, that silence wasn't her fault. It was just the language others chose when they couldn't translate her light. When I finished, I didn't cry. I didn't post it. I just saved it in a folder named Legacy, because that's what healing really is. Not performance, not revenge, but reclaiming your voice and not needing it to be echoed in order to matter. As the year closed, Elavana grew. We launched our new mentorship branch, led by former students. Clara joined as a remote advisor. Eric started sending job shadowing videos for the kids in our vocational track. Mom sent a Christmas card with my name written first, not in bold, not in gold, just first. I smiled, knowing it was probably unconscious, but even small shifts start with someone picking up a pen differently. And me, I kept building, but I stopped running. I stopped proving. I started enjoying the space I had carved, the one I didn't wait for someone else to grant, and I made sure the door stayed open for the next girl who felt like the quiet one in the middle. Because the truth is, being forgotten can turn into power if you remember yourself fiercely enough. So if you've ever sat at a table and realized no one saw you, if you've waited for a gift that never came, or a nod that never arrived, know this: your worth isn't measured by the family's silence or their applause. It's in the life you build anyway, the empire you create quietly, the truth you carry without needing a microphone. Have you ever had to walk away from being overlooked and into your own light? I'd love to hear your story, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be seen by yourself first.